Imagine being remembered not for your life, not for your thoughts or dreams, but for the sheer number of children you were forced to father. Over 200 of them. Like a prized animal in a cruel experiment. This isn't a myth. It's not a fable told around a campfire. It's a documented horror, a reality etched into the dark corners of human history. It's the story of Pataseca, a towering enslaved man, over 7 feet tall, used not for his labor, but for his genetics. A man reduced to a breeding machine, whose children became currency, whose body became property. And this didn't happen in some ancient forgotten empire. It happened right here in the 19th century America's dot. And if this story moves you, if it provokes outrage or stirs even a flicker of empathy, please like this video, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe to this channel. We dive deep into the hidden histories that were left out of the textbooks, the voices buried beneath the weight of time. Share this with someone who needs to know, because we owe it to Pataseca and to millions like him to confront this truth and make sure such horrors never take root again. In the early 1800s, the world began taking tentative steps toward ending the transatlantic slave trade. In 1808, the United States and Britain banned the importation of African slaves. Ships would no longer legally carry chained men, women, and children from the coasts of West Africa to the Americas. But while the international trade was shut down, slavery itself remained. And inside the plantation walls of Brazil, a more sinister system took root, one that turned human reproduction into a calculated industry. That system was slave breeding. On a plantation deep within Brazil, one man became its most infamous symbol. Roque Jose Florencio, known as Pataseca, born in 1828 in Angola, he was ripped from his homeland and transported across the ocean, forced into bondage in a world he never chose. From the beginning, Pataseca was different. Towering over 7 feet tall and weighing more than 300 pounds, he stood out. His physical power and genetic makeup were seen not as gifts, but as resources to exploit. He was renamed Pataseca, meaning dry leg in Portuguese, likely referring to his towering legs and lean, muscular form. From the moment he arrived, he was examined like livestock. His height, his posture, his teeth, his skin, his muscle density, everything about him was scrutinized by slaveholders who saw not a man, but a means to an end. They were not interested in his thoughts, his past, his hopes. They were only interested in what he could produce. Pataseca was not worked to death in the fields. Instead, he was kept for another purpose. His owner saw him as a tool to breed a stronger generation of slaves. Women were selected and sent to him. No consent, no dignity, no humanity. Pataseca became a father not through love, but through force. The children born from these unions were not celebrated as family, but counted as assets. Slavery had taken his freedom, now it took his legacy. Slave breeding was not an accidental practice. It was an economic strategy. With the importation of African slaves no longer legal, plantation owners needed a new supply. Instead of bringing in more slaves, they decided to grow their own. Enslaved men and women became instruments in a macabre reproduction scheme. Strong men like Pataseca were forced to mate with multiple women, while enslaved women were forced to bear children year after year. Over the decades, Pataseca was forced to father more than 200 children. Each child represented another brick in the slave economy's foundation, born into chains, raised to labor, destined to repeat the cycle. These children were measured, inspected, and sold as commodities. Some of them were kept on the plantation. Others were traded or gifted. His body was a factory. His children were products. In Santa Eudoxia, São Carlos, nearly 30% of the current population can trace their lineage back to him. His DNA became a commodity. But he never knew most of these children. He never held them as a father should. They were taken from their mothers and reassigned as laborers. The bonds of blood were meaningless in the eyes of the system. Despite all this, Pataseca endured. He lived through brutality that would break most men. He watched women cry as they were sent to him, knowing what was expected. He watched as babies were taken away, never to be seen again. He listened to the whip crack in the distance, knowing that any resistance meant punishment for him or for others. His silence was not acceptance. It was survival. And he survived. By 1888, Brazil became the last country in the Western Hemisphere to abolish slavery. Pataseca, now 60 years old, was a free man. But what did freedom mean to a man who had never been allowed to live his own life? Who had been used as a tool since adolescence? Still, he walked away from the plantation, not as a broken man, but as a living testament to the strength of the human spirit. He did not disappear into obscurity. Pataseca became a leader in his community. He helped newly freed people find homes, jobs, and purpose. He shared what little he had. He spoke of Angola, of his village, of what had been taken from him. And slowly, the people began to see not just a giant of a man, but a giant in heart. He eventually married a woman named Palmyra. For the first time, he had a choice. Together, they had 9 children. These were not children taken from him by force. They were family. He sang to them. He taught them to walk, to speak, to laugh. He told them stories that had been told to him in his childhood, before the ships came. One day, while walking through a field, Pataseca stepped on a nail. The wound seemed minor, but medical care was scarce. He received attention from a local healer, but the infection spread. Tetanus took hold. His muscles locked, his body shook, and after weeks of suffering, the man who had survived a century of slavery, breeding, and forced isolation finally succumbed. He was 130 years old. Every year on June 13th, in Santa Eudoxia, his descendants gather. Some carry his height, some carry his eyes. All carry his story. They speak of him not as a victim, but as a patriarch, as a man whose legacy was taken, then reclaimed, as a symbol of what was done and what must never be done again. And that's why we tell this story, not to shock, but to remember, not to pity, but to learn. Because in telling Pataseca's story, we unearth the brutal truths of a system that dehumanized millions. We name the crimes that history tried to bury. And in doing so, we reclaim the humanity of those who lived and died under that system. So if this story moved you, if it opened your eyes or weighed heavy on your heart, please like this video. Leave a comment to keep the conversation going. Subscribe for more stories that matter. Stories that challenge. Stories that should never be forgotten. Because history isn't just about what happened. It's about what we do with the truth today.